Okay, so today we have a great opportunity to have a discussion with His Excellency's Ambassador of European Union Delegation in Vietnam, Mr. Giorgio Aliberti.
Yes, nice
Thank
to
you
meet
so
you.
much
Thank you.
for your time with us. We are just Respect Vietnam as a company and organization. We focus on people development and organizational excellence. Over the past years, we're working with a number of company and business around Vietnam and with thousands of workers around the country. And we are working with a lot of manpower and productivity issue in Vietnam. And we know that part of that was one of some of those interests and concern from those delegation, and I know that we talk and share some of that before. So today is just one great opportunity that we would love to discuss some of the work you are doing, and maybe we would love to share some of the initiative we having. We hope that we could have share some of good story in this talk
Sure.
today. So
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. May I start
Absolutely, sure.
asking, not personal, but is this you in Vietnam for quite some time? How
Yeah,
many
three years now.
3 years.
And of course, yes, during COVID, I think it's not real time, so
Yes.
I think I should stay a bit longer because
But
to
I know
recover
that
a little bit.
you have a great experience with Vietnam during COVID.
Yes,
we talk
that
about
we managed. Yeah. Of course,
so
we
many
managed to-
story in economic
survive.
downturn and
Yeah.
the social development during the time. And I know that I'll just try to focus with, even though I know that you have to work in so many great work with Vietnam, but would like to focus on the manpower quality in this topic today.
Sure.
With COVID, we see so many company closing down and a lot of struggle from the manpower. But then now after COVID, of course everything's go back to normal, but we still need to work on how to get in the right shape, businesses as well. So I would love to hear from you, your experience in Vietnam, and then especially during COVID. What do you think general about what we trying to do, as well as the government and the people of Vietnam trying to go back to a normal life with jobs and job security in the country?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the government has done a great job in terms of understanding when it was the time to go back to kind of normalcy, because I think in other cases, as we know, some countries wanted to stay closed with heavy lockdown for too much of a time, and so they created problems. I think Vietnam, you went to a level where you understood that, well, maybe it was a bit too much. And then, thanks to the vaccine, of course, thanks to the vaccination, we as European Union were very happy to help on this, of course, also to help. But I think it was a good decision by the government to say, by the Prime Minister, to say, well, we have to go back, we cannot pay such a high economic price.
Yes.
So I think they managed to relax the rules and try covering the population and then get back to work. What is, I think, difficult, what I heard, it was difficult for many companies, was to go back to where they were before.
Yes.
Because, for instance, in Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, many people were here, workers, and they had to go away. In Ho Chi Minh, you remember, they were stuck there for 2 months.
Yes.
So they went back to their villages. They were afraid to coming back. So I think many companies, also many foreign companies, many people we know, they were telling us, listen, we don't find enough people. So the issue is the people are not coming back. And I think many people, not only in Vietnam, but all over the world, after COVID, many people realize, well, maybe the priority on work is, maybe a bit less heavy than before. We want to have a good balance of life, or you stay in the village. It's enough what you get to eat, and so you don't want to go back in the
I'd
factory.
rather stay with my family.
I'd stay with my family, maybe with my kids, and not going back in the factory to have a hard life. So I think the issue of the workers' condition is even more essential than before. It's even more relevant than before, because I think we have to consider this in a more holistic way, Because before we didn't think, also companies want just to hire people, good jobs, bad jobs, they just work and go home and job and go home. this is not enough. I think the
Yes.
workers need to be respected a bit more.
Yes.
Need to have also the sense of they are improving the growth, you know,
Yes.
for themselves, for the company. So I think it will be important also for businesses to fully understand this. I think it's a change of mind. It's a mindset that needs to be changed in order to really understand that sometimes it's not just profitability, but you have also something else beyond this. And not all the companies think in the same way. So I think this is an important element. For Europeans, this is particularly crucial because, as we know, we try to insist a lot on these issues. And also when we have foreign companies, European companies coming here, foreign direct investment, they have to abide by certain standards that we are pretty strict in Europe.
Yes.
And they continue to be. They have to be also here. And they will become
already
more
did
and
that.
more.
Yes.
Already that. So I think it's also a positive example for other companies, also for local companies or for other foreign companies to see, because there will be a competition. If they say they have better situation in one company, they
Yes.
want to go there, not to, yeah. So I think it's a matter of try to balance the market to improve slowly the level also of workers' condition all over the place. And what we saw in different parts of the world, it's a win-win situation, because if the workers are happier, they can be more productive, and also the companies will make more profit anyway. So I think
Yes.
it's,
Yes.
at the end, it's in their own interest. I think I don't have to tell you that, you know better than me. But I mean, it's really something on which I think we go the same thinking as you, because of what you're telling about what you are doing. This is very similar to our approach, you know, in order to try to have a better understanding between the companies and the workers, try to give better conditions and try to respect workers as much as possible. So I think this is an important element. As I said, with COVID, I think it's becoming even more relevant, I think, also in Vietnam.
You already captured almost everything I supposed to ask you, because what I'm seeing with the European, Union delegation over the past year is so many good studies, so many effort to try to help with capacity building for company and for the labor side, and then policy, and then training and education. And my also interest every time you have a white paper, the whole economic. And social development in Vietnam with a very good data, very good statistic that we have to learn from. So what you just mentioned about holistic approach, which is I believe that the government, there's a different government who's having representative in Vietnam, having company working in Vietnam already did a lot. And I don't think we have to repeat it here, which is I would love to maybe looking at a little bit different perspective or looking at this picture. So we all know that before COVID, it's already have a challenge with labor productivity. Labor productivity in Vietnam pretty low compared to the region. And then we have this quality, not just high-level workers, not just low-level worker, but high-level worker. And then in our perspective, the management skill in the markets also is need a lot of improvement. So we have a very famous saying during COVID and any crisis that any business, any organization who can learn better than competitor, just like you mentioned it.
Sure.
They would be, and they can learn every time from everything you do when they do business. Then they would have very unique, sustainable, competitive edge.
Yeah, sure.
And then I think that so many cases already prove it. But what we're studying really deep into this concept, and we realize this is the very interesting and very important concept for that named learning organization. So learning organization is a term referring to the organization, not just the leader, helping the people studying better, reading more book, coming to more training classes, but they actually have to learn from what they do every day. And then more important, they have to do that together. Because only by doing together, they can learn faster than competitor, right?
Sure.
Not just the leader, they're smart enough, they learn better, but if the people under them, they cannot do what they ask for, then how can they can be resilient or anything. So with the term of learning organization, this time we started really deeply in it, and we would like you to have your buy-in in that term a little bit. What do you think if we could be able to make, let's start with company from Europe coming to Vietnam, and if they can show that they are learning organization, they learning with the Vietnamese manager, learning with the Vietnamese worker, go through a different struggles and challenge in business. Let take that concept a little bit from that abstract. What do you think?
I think it's not only they should do this, but they have no choice but to do this if they want to be successful. Because of course, when you come to Vietnam from Europe, you don't know the country. I mean, you have a different mentality. So this is also my experience, of course, as I'm coming here not for business but for diplomacy. But it's the same. I mean, you arrive here, you have to listen to your Vietnamese colleagues, because otherwise you don't understand the country. And the same for a business. If you don't know the market, you're lost. So you need to work together. And then, of course, you need to share. Also here, I'll always share with the Vietnamese colleagues to understand the situation. Sometimes we don't get it.
Yes.
It's very simple, but this is what happens. So I think if you're doing business, you're out of the market if you don't understand the market. So for me, maybe I have difficulties, but I still stay there. Yes. But for a business, you can be out of the market. So it's an obligation, I would say. Yes. It's really the thing to do. It's a must. You have to do that. And then it's part, of course, of your growing attitude. If you want to grow as a company, if you want to grow as an individual, as an employee, as an employee, I think this is the way ahead. I mean, you have to, of course, exchange views with people working with you, and Vietnamese people working here are the key, I would say. The key to understand the market, so the key for success. So I think this is a very important element. The idea of learning made me think also about this idea of lifelong learning, because this is something that also in Europe is very well developed. And we have also example like in the Nordic country. I think a couple of years ago, they say the statistics was that at least 50% of the people from 25 to 65 had at least one adult experience of life learning. So they continue to do some way of learning experience during their lifetime, which is, I think, crucial in this world where you have, we are living through deep transitions, green transition, digital transition. It's a new world. So if you don't follow on this, you'll be loser. You'll be out of the market. You'll be out of the job. So I think it's an important element. So the idea of continuous learning, I think, is essential in all jobs, but particularly in business, because I mean you have to survive in business. So I mean it's a matter of really survival, I think.
Which means that you believe that is a must.
It's a must.
And
I think
every
it's a must.
business should do that.
I think
but
so.
Do you think that many company and most of company already see it?
No, I don't think that everybody sees it. I think it's more a way of, if you think about it, you should do it. But maybe
like
then ideal, this is what you have to do, but maybe some people will not. I'm afraid some people will not, because of many reasons, because maybe also, I'm talking about foreigners, maybe they come here with their own ideas and they think they can use the same recipe in different parts of the world, but then maybe it's not true. But maybe for some years you can work because maybe you have very good products or whatever. But I think sooner or later you'll get there when you have to face with obstacles that without, as you said, with learning approach, you will not go over it. So I think it's a matter of time. Those who are smarter, maybe they do it on their own. Those who maybe are a bit lazier, they will find an obstacle. After that, they will realize that you have to do that. So I think it's one way or another we'll get there, but for sure not everybody's doing that. It's true.
That's the realistic reality.
Realistic.
And I'm just really like the way you say that we have to do it. Everybody's supposed to do it, but then it have to take time for it.
Yeah.
And this is the question we talk all the times about how much time is enough.
Sure.
So for example, we're talking about lifelong learning, and then we later have a very interesting controversial lately in Vietnam, talking about learning where you have the enabling environment, you have resources, time to leave you. That particular person is supposed to learn for their own, for a long life, and then for your whole life, continuous doing this for yourself. But in the, an organization, in one particular company, or even in an NGO, in a, small company, studying together.
Sure.
it's a different thing. And let take an example of what we've been discussing so far about, for example, all the standards that we're taking from Europe to Vietnam. We would like to make sure that the company in Vietnam, they actually do good for their worker. Literally, in ideal world, we don't have to. They're supposed to do that good thing for their workers, right? And in order to, produce better, make more money, get a higher margin, but it's not always the case. No. So all the regulation and the requirement and the guiding from other country, other government, it's just helping businesses in Vietnam. The majority who don't realize that learning is necessary. Yeah. Then here you are. You have to teach and have to do training for your workers, and you have to do this and have to do that. But when I'm studying, I really realized that in Europe or in a developed country, when I work at a particular hotel, particular manufacturer, leader willing to spend time and resources and create an environment for that lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. In Vietnam, we like to do a little bit shortcut. Yeah. We go fast. We want to growth, not sustainability yet. Yeah. And the matter of people try to learn how to adopt those standards and regulation into their factory, into their hotel, or into the hospital, in some of the school, getting a little bit overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. So the argument we're seeing that, we have so many standards. Let's not mention there's some CSR standards, social doing good for the society standard. Too much. Mm-hmm. We cannot handle that. What do you think about that?
No, I think it can be a real issue, of course, because also the standardization, the standard definition, of course, they come from different stories, from different parts of the world. And every country may be trying to impose its own standards. So, of course, it can create some issues there. So I think you're right that there should be maybe a simplification and try to understand. I think simplification of standards is important because regulations, we see it here, are extremely complicated. And as you said, it can be overwhelming. So I think we have
process.
It's a learning process. Yeah. No, but I think you have to, of course, you have to consider, to acknowledge that Vietnam has been developing only recently. Yeah. Wherever in Europe we have been, for a long time. So of course we had more time to think about these things. And usually when you're just running, you don't have time to think. So we're a bit slower now. Also, if you look at our numbers in growth. So when you walk, you can think. When you run, you're just trying to avoid the obstacles. So of course, it's a different race. So we have to acknowledge that.
It's not good for traffic.
It's not good for traffic either. But I mean, it's true that we have to acknowledge the differences. We cannot pretend that Vietnam becomes, like a European country tomorrow, because it will not happen. So
we have some ambition.
You have some ambition, and it's good.
Not there
but
yet.
Of course, you need step by step.
Yeah.
This aspect of learning and lifelong learning, I think, is essential, and it's good that someone like you, some of your, some companies, consultancy, they raise the issue because, as you said, some people just think about money, profit, and forget about this thing, but it's not sustainable. So I think it's essentially exactly also in line with what, as European Union, we do, on this kind of thing. So it's very relevant to continue insisting this, knowing that, it's a step-by-step process. So the idea of the leadership understand better that there is a need for them. It's good. So the idea of corporate social responsibility is a very good idea because it shows that business care about what they do, about the impact they have. So it's essential. The idea of too many standards can be tackled trying to simplify these things. So I think the whole thing is a proper thing to do, so corporate social responsibility is very important, and it's part of the idea of sustainability. But sometimes, it's good maybe to also to think about that, to see maybe there are too many rules. We're trying to simplify to see what are the real priorities and to work better on this. I think because not everything can be a priority. So if you want to have priorities, so you have to simplify.
Given the limited resources,
exactly. You have limited resources, but everybody has limited resources in the end. So I think it's important to prioritize and to see what really needs to be done. So, but CSR as such, of course, is an essential element. I think it's important for business, and we expect European companies, of course, to be very rigorous on this. Because
I'm so happy. And you think it's relevant. Absolutely. And already two keywords that I already take away from what you're saying is simplicity. simplification of everything is way too overwhelmed, because if yes, we have enough time, we have enough resources, but given the fact that we never have enough, even before COVID. But you know, the good part, only one good part thing from COVID-19, what I'm seeing, and many people agree, is actually the urgency of changes. And people say that, okay, I have no time, no resources. This is how I have to do something to change. And the simplicity. And the next keyword you mentioned is priority.
Yes, absolutely.
That's come into the table, the agenda. People start talking about it, because when we're working with the company and some NGO as well, we don't just talk about CSR, we talk about real core value and their main business. And there's an interesting work when we talk about performance management. I mean, one of the most important way of managing your organization is you know who's working better than other, who's the best one, who need to get paid better, who need to be recognized better. It's already showing that we need really good way to think, like you said, changing mindset to do something, make it simple and make it prioritize. For example, we talk about what we learned from Europe and developed country about the same kind of tool of performance management. But when it comes to Vietnam, it's no different from CSR. It's really so many ways of doing it. So if you really want to go faster, you want to go faster than your competitor, you have to learn really deep, not just learn, continue learning, but learn deep to get, say, which one that I'm going to use to be fitting with my company culture, my organization culture. So that's a similar one. But thank you so much for that absolutely. Keyword, because it's exactly relevant with what we're doing. And simplicities and priority, it should be in the business agenda. What I would like to raise it up a little bit, when we talking about different company have a leader realize that, okay, I need to make things simple. I need to think lean thinking, right? Smarter, more priority in what I really focus and most important. With how we could be able to bring the similar message to the bigger range of businesses and leader, or just let them, whoever the good leader would realize it? Is that any way we will make it happen to have more and more business realize that it's time to change mindset and to go for that destination?
No, I think there is a need of education. This education means also education of leadership. And the awareness of the issue is the first step to do. So I think that many people do not understand yet. They are not completely aware of this issue. So I think there is a need to be public on these things. So to show why this has to happen and why this can improve actually the result at the end. So I think it's a matter of awareness raising. So awareness raising campaigns are important in this thing. Consultancy or NGO, they can do an important work, or some other organization, because I think it's the first step is to be aware of an issue. And I don't think that everybody is aware, to be honest. So I think it's not maybe natural, so you need to someone to tell you that is an issue, and then just try to be cooperative. It depends on how you say these things, but I think if you are constructive, everybody in principle is ready to listen. So I think it's important also this aspect of education, awareness raising, and
so we need some catalyst.
I think some catalyst. Catalyst is a good word. I think just to get the spark, because I think it's important to make people understand, and then leaders understand, because of course a leader of a company will understand that will see the results, but sometimes you don't have the time to stop and think. So what you said before, COVID was important because we all had to stop. And so we thought a bit more than usual. And
especially now back to normal. We
cannot stop. We cannot stop again. So.
We have to take back. We already lost.
So it's important.
This is very good point. This is a very important point. So how can we will make, because part of a learning is to reflect. You learn new thing and you reflect, and then maybe you have to try it a little bit. You pilot to see whether it's work. This one I think is one of the biggest challenge with business for changes is including technology and innovation. People hesitate to change because you're not sure whether it's work. And I'm a business people. I cannot pay for if things go wrong. And we still working on that. We still, one of the way that we're trying to pilot some of our initiative with most of our leading company who already have leader with a very good vision, and they already seeing, they already be aware. And by that, we're seeing that they willing to take a pilot, they're willing to take the risk, they want to change, and they said, nothing's going to change if we don't do it. So one of our work we're doing relating to what you mentioned with simplicity and priority, for example, is make a standard, working standard in one company, including CSR, into infographic, using lean thinking and design thinking to make everyone become a lean thinker. People start to think lean.
Good.
We talk to each other in the simple way that you get the main message, really exchange and transfer among each other first, and then if you understand each other enough, you can continue. And then is there another very interesting concept that I want to share with you, and I would love to hear what you're saying. Part of a learning is when you reflect, and in one organization we have the term called single feedback loop or double feedback loop. Another word saying that when you seeing something go wrong in your company, some people raising their voice. They say there is a problem with production. There is a problem with service out there. This is a feedback I want to give to contribute. Leader doesn't want to. Most leader doesn't like to hear that because everybody wants to listen to success story. Nobody likes to talk about failure.
True.
So there's a situation with the single feedback loop, which means that if you see the problem, you solve it. Just get it done, and then you go to the next. But the problem is that kind of problem stay, and it would repeat again. For the company who do double loops, they try to solve it to the end, so the problem would not repeat it. That two ways already happen with the different type of leadership. What do you think is in the real general world that we're seeing? Is that how we would be able to think about, go more for the direction of because we talk about sustainability here, and we have a concrete term of put it like that.
Yeah, I think that many people do, as you said, this single feedback because it's the easier thing to do.
Yes.
So
right.
I think that quick fix. So people like quick fix. People in the business think even more because they cannot waste time. And so I think this is a problem. Okay, you solve it and we go ahead without going deep. So I think this is part of a discussion we had before about the idea of learning. So why is a learning organization important? Because learning means understanding and try to find solution to problems, not just to quick fix. So I think it's all linked. No, what you're saying, it's linked to what we said before.
Yes.
Unless you have this approach, you don't get it. So if you don't have this approach, you try just to say, okay, small things, small problems, we fix them and we go ahead. We fix this, fix that, go ahead. You don't realize that maybe there is, as you said, a feedback or things come back again with the same or similar situations and they're not solved. So I think this is part of a mindset. So in what we are saying, I think at the end is a better mindset. If you have the right mindset, you understand to go deep in the problems, to understand the sustainability issue, and then your company can be successful in the long term. If you want just a quick fix to quick money, you don't care about these things, but then you don't go very far. So I think it depends on the style of leadership that you have. And the businesses, you know better than me because you meet a lot of business people. I think some leaders understand this, some others not. I think the majority, maybe they don't have this deep understanding, deep awareness. And that's why we see that only a few really are very successful. Many others, maybe they are not too successful. So I think it's a matter of the style of leadership, the deep
So which means that's already explained, those already successful.
Well, I think the successful, I mean, if they are successful in organic ways, of course, not if the government helps them that they're successful, but even without any help, they are successful. It means that probably they find the proper way to go ahead in a sustainable way. So they understand how to learn from mistakes, because we all make mistakes. So of course, this is
nobody
natural.
Perfect, and it's part of learning.
And part of learning, you think of in the US, failure is normal. I mean, if you ask people, it's normal. Yes, I failed on this, and then I learn more. In some other cultures, also in Europe, much less. So here, maybe much less. People don't like to show failures.
Yes.
Some other cultures say, okay, I failed on something, but then I built on this, and I grew up and I learned from it. So I think this is an essential element. We are all humans. We make mistakes. But if we learn from them, sometimes we have to make mistakes, sometimes we fall down, but then you get up and you go ahead. So I think
and then
this
learn
is
about
part
that mistake.
If you learn about mistakes, of course it makes sense, and you grow. That's the idea of learning, of growing as a person, as a businessman, as a worker. In any role you have, you can learn, you can improve. So from the top to the more humble worker. I mean, everybody has his own role, and everybody can give a contribution. So to the sustainability of a company. In many cases, these issues come from the bottom, because maybe also low level say, well, there was this problem, I try to solve it this way, and you can tell your boss.
The company listen to the initiative,
they listen, exactly. So
because they know more.
They know more, exactly.
Because
they know more, of course, because every day they are doing these kind of things, so they know more. And say, change this, change that, and then it tells. So it's all a matter of how you deal with business, how you manage your own staff, you manage your workers. So at the end, it's the respect you have also for the workers. Because if you respect someone, you are ready to listen. If you don't respect someone, you don't care. So if they tell you something, say, oh, no, I don't care. What do you know about that? I'm the boss, so I know better than you. So I think it's all part of mindset. It's all part of respect. You are called respect, so you know better than me. But I mean, this is a crucial element. We always say about sustainability. We are learning. No, but I mean, this is the essential elements to have a sustainable, successful company. Because if it's not sustainable, it will go up and then it will go down. So to be sustainably successful, I think you need a number of elements, and this idea of growing mindset, lifelong experience, learn experience, I think are crucial in order to better understand, to become better people and better businessmen.
So, which means that we all agree the fact that is a part of a learning organization. There's all kind of element, including learning, and then giving, accept the mistake and learn from it.
Learn from them.
On. Yes. So that's what you mentioned. That's get me go right into the good term of this. So maybe hopefully that, because we try to test and use a lot of different terms to go with different leaders. Hopefully that it's not like they don't see it or because they don't have time for it, but they don't realize it. But there's a very good term that I think most of our leaders would feel comfortable with it. I don't know what you agree with me, but there's a term called intelligent fast failure. Intelligent fast mistake. So we make mistake, we fail, but the best way to really look into it, really deeply, learn from it, and really fall fast, which means that make sure our mistakes doesn't stay that long. Which means you have to spend a lot of effort. You have to work, with the wisdom from the teams around you to solve that as quick as possible. But of course, into the end, so it's not going to repeat again. That's why it's called intelligent, smart. Otherwise, not smart. Because if it happened and then repeat it again later on, it's already one cost. Not smart. And then if it take too long to change it, it's not smart either. What do you think about it? It sounds great?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds very, very, very smart, actually. No, I think it's correct. Of course, we have to find smart solution in a complex world. I think this is an important element because, of course, we are now talking in theory, of course. We have to understand and knowledge that people in business, they have everyday decision. Maybe they have to make 100 decisions per day. And they are under pressure. Maybe the companies, the boss, super boss say, I want this, I want that. You have to deal with problems you find out. So it's not easy. So we have to acknowledge it's not easy. So seen from outside, of course, it's easier, but when you are in everyday work, it can become a bit more different. So I think to be smart is essential, but this is essentially if you try to step back a little bit from what you're doing, maybe in the evening or you go home and then you think I did this and that, maybe there was a mistake. I mean, sometimes you have to step back to understand things, and so the idea of a smart reaction is part of it. So of course, if you're too much into it, you don't even stop and think. If you step back, maybe you understand and you can have this sort of a reaction, which is
yes.
a solve attitude, solving attitude approach.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Which means that you agree that that term my work we were putting into the perspective and people. I'm glad because when we have this kind of conversation, we normally would not go to case by case to talk about because we have so many things out there.
Sure.
Like we're talking about how we would sit down one day and then listen to them, look in the table, what priority we should go for. Is that truly we can think simple to get things done and prioritize. It's not always the same. Yeah. But that's why I think it's so important with the role of education and training, where that's part of what we're talking today. So let's continue with this lot of terms as we discussing earlier. And then when we talk about learning organization, this is the comic our artists created with our team mindset. When we talk about learning curve, in an organization, people learn, and then the more they learn, the more knowledge and more mindsets they change, the more progress they would make.
Sure.
But for some people, they would already see the mindset going up. They're happy and they're very good at work and as a leader as well. Mm-hmm. But some people, if they cannot measure their learning curve, how much effort, how much book they need to read, how much work you have to do, how much more you have to learn, you look like you're really lost. Yeah. Of course, for those who think that spending too much money, time, and effort on learning and education and development, but you don't see any result, then some of the investor and leadership, no, I don't want to invest in it anymore. So part of the picture is also the idea why we're talking about learning organization. It's so important to have a good measurement for people to really reflect what we learn and learn fast from it. Like we say, learn smart.
Sure.
And all the term we just mentioned is reflecting it. And I can tell you that some of organizations, some of business with the good leader, good vision, they already see it. So I just want to go back to what we discussed earlier about learning among this, what we have in the developed economy, in Europe, coming to Vietnam as doing business and have to learn about what happened in Vietnam, as well as the Vietnamese business learning what you have in European and in order to export, in order to do more joining the market. That kind of a learning, how we actually would be able to measure from all the effort, trying to learn from each other like that, whether it's all those learning and development and education effort that government trying to help business, is that the way to measure? Or that from CSR perspective, for example, we have a due diligence framework and a lot of effort to bring into Vietnam and try to see what company is doing better than other. How's the way to measure all that?
Well, I think it's an important element, of course, as you said, because if you don't measure, you don't know. So the basis of knowledge is measuring, because you may think you're going in the right direction, maybe you're going wrong. Yes. So measurement is an essential problem. I agree with you. In terms of due diligence, I want also to mention that in Europe we presented a draft directive on due diligence for business that will have an impact not only in Europe but also abroad. It will be mainly for big companies, so more than $150 million turnover, and more than 500 workers. So it's for big companies essentially, but it will have an impact on the whole supply chain. So also here it means the companies investing here, they have to be careful that social rights, environmental rights, human rights are respected. So this is an element. Due diligence, of course, is a concept which is a bit difficult also to evaluate, but I think it makes sense to show that with common sense you try to be sure that there are no issues left unresolved. So in that sense, you see, you have 2 cases, 3 cases, 10 cases, 100 cases. I mean, you will see if there are issues on social rights, or how will they treat workers, on human rights or something. Of course, you can measure the incidents you can have, the conflicts you can have. So there are ways of seeing if you're going in the right direction or not. So in that sense, I think you can find ways of measuring also these kind of things. And similarly, also you can measure how you go ahead in this way to see if you're going right, if it's not good enough, or more than something that needs to be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in other words, we also have to have a smart and a very good
smart,
measurement tool.
Yeah, the measurement tool is not easy, of course, but I think you need to find ways to consider this, what can be considered as positive, what can be considered as success, and what instead is a failure. Even there you can try to define common standards, also common sense standards, to see how much people have to simplify, make it very simple. I don't know, having one hour every week you discuss with your people, 2 hours doing this and reading your book and just showing what you're learning. I mean, simple things, but you can put a matrix maybe down to simplify a number of things, and then ask people to do that. And so you can try to find maybe some common understanding on the results. Yeah.
And I already see there's a learning process during the ways that we all develop due diligence, the tool over the years. I mean, in the past, we also working with the program that there's not only auditing or due diligence with checklist, not anymore, because the checklist with hundreds of items doesn't reflecting the most important thing, showing that whether that company is good in ESG, in environmental governance and social. The checklist would be lost in translation. The checklist would sometimes confuse the auditor and even the most dedicated inspector, right? So how to actually simplify it in the way that everybody involved in the process really realize that this is the most important factor. So one of the interesting work we're doing is we're seeing that when company trying to train their workers from labor law and then for their regulation, every time they have to put about 100 workers in one place and then start teaching them about how many new items in the labor law and how many items in the particular law and how to make sure the worker learn from it. But the worker said, no, I'm already so busy with work. My mind was think about tomorrow what we're going to eat or how I'm going to pay my bill. It is not working. And so when companies spending a lot of work and time for those training, in the end of that particular years, and some due diligence expert came and said, did the company train you? They do. So do you remember this part? And that? No, I don't remember. So the company realized, oh, I spent a lot of time and effort to do all this, but turns out it doesn't help. Maybe we have to find somewhere else. And that's why visualizing and digitalizing regulation and standards step into. And I'm so happy that you also, buy in and supported in this an idea and bring idea into practice. We would like to introduce this to more, but think a little more on how to simplify those standard and regulation. I mean, from policy making standpoint, of course, that is, most of a policymaker job, and of course, but they are not in the company.
Yeah, sure.
They not even the one who come visit every time they do due diligence. And some of the works is already as well lost in translation, for example. How to make sure we would be able to simplify this effort and try to make a different stakeholder get in, and really having the conversation would be improving this process.
Well, I think, as you said, I mean, this is very important. As you said, it's good to have these kind of examples, those kind of things that really simplify, because when policymakers do things, they think big. But then when you are small, you need to pass the message. And so you do big things, and as you said, lost in translation, nothing gets down. So nothing trickles down. So I think it's important, as you said, to try to simplify. Now, this is a work that also maybe consultants or NGOs or some others can do to help also companies, because I think, as we said before, companies often don't have the time to do that. But I think it's a good idea to try really to be simple, to show to everybody. So if everybody understands the 4 main things that needs to be done, it would be a huge step ahead. So I think it's a good idea to try to pass a simple message, standardizing things as much as possible in a simple way. And this would be very helpful. So I think what you're doing is very in the right direction, also for sustainability. I think it's an important element. We're happy to support you on this one.
I know it's not easy yet.
No, it's not easy. No, it's not easy, of course. But it's good that you think about these issues and you're trying to to present smart problems in a simple way, so easy to understand, which is the most important thing. So it's a sort of translator, let's say, between the big business and the workers. I think in a way translating the big ideas to workers and trying to pass the main message. So we are very much supportive in this, in particular because you mentioned a lot about sustainability, about these issues that are really key for green transition, digital transition that we are living today. So it's a very good job that you're doing, and
thank you
we're
so
very,
much.
very happy to support you in this and to help you for what we can.
I know this could be not an easy way of doing, because what we're doing a little bit of change.
Yeah, sure.
No, of course, we had resistance, and somebody told me that vulnerability is the first plate of innovation. Sometimes you have to, feel like pretty lonely, and you have to be a little bit, go ahead a little bit in order to get there. But I'm so happy that I have a lot of support, and not just us. We are working with so many other stakeholders. People are trying to do their own way, different way. So maybe it would be the last, not just a question, but I think it will be a proposal of, I think from our perspective, and not only respect Vietnam, but as many stakeholders are trying to do this, the good thing to you, that maybe would be from the European as ambassador, that would be wonderful if we had more opportunity for different stakeholders like us. We will be able to share our initiative, because what we're seeing right now in a different forum, different landscape, seems like it's a little bit I think it's a little bit, we need some more of a collaboration, of sharing of what we're doing. This, what we're seeing a big forum, but we cannot tell all the from, we talk about deep learning, right? Is some of the one or two workshop cannot tell is really a good learning process. I hope that the Europe
we can help you this.
Union would pull it together. We would share those, and you would be ours, not just you only supporting us, but you will see the process, and maybe you would see that whether it's help, because when the company from Europe coming to Vietnam or already here, they already learn from this part, they would be the wonderful good example for the Vietnamese company. Because that's how we're seeing the market doing. They learn from a bigger player. Of course. Yes. No, of course. Yes. No, thank you for your proposal. Let's see. Well, I think they can have opportunities to work together and to facilitate this message to be passed on also with other companies and Chamber of Commerce that I think could be more than receptive to these ideas. No, thank you so much. And all the best for your future activities. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you I just would like to use some of our artist work. I hope that you would enjoy, because we're using some of the comic. Very good. Thank you. Nice. I think you might like this picture. We're talking about quality and equality in a simple way with a cockfighting. Ways that we talk about parity, whether we put in support
the same or not.
the most vulnerable, where we support everyone. This is, I think you would like it, with a lot of leader and business as well. Enjoy it. We see how is it influencing in the corporate culture from top to bottom. But we have to learn to change, because everyone want to change. Absolutely. And lastly, this is the ones that one of our students they recommend, and we have the program of helping have a fellowship for 100 female leaders. This is very nice. And of course we hope that would come from another 100 learning organizations. If you can identify. Gender we didn't discuss, but I think gender and youth I think are essential part of this change, and it's really essential for us that they are at the center of this change. It's so this female leader, she believes that CSR, any good thing, a company should be able to come from within. Then with that, you don't need any external pressure or forces in order for you to be better. So I hope you enjoy some of our work. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and for your
pleasure.
encouraging words, and everything you shared
pleasure.
today is actually would be this, leading spirit that we would love to when we do our work. And again, we wish you all this great work that you're doing, but it's up to many other great level of helping Vietnam working in much better collaboration with European Union.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
again, all the best, and keep up with your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.